Hi, and everyone. Welcome to the podcast. This is Prabodha Dewanarayana show. So, in today's podcast episode, we have a special guest here, Mrs. Mazo with us. Hello, Mrs. Mazo. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good, Mrs. Maso. Actually, uh, talking about Mrs. Maso, I want to tell you guys that I was in Florida Institute of Technology back in the day, long time ago. So I met Mrs. Maso there. Actually, I'm one of her students for a small time period, but I learned a lot from her. So I contacted her recently and I told her that Mrs. Monso, please come to my podcast and let's talk about communication. So uh, here she is. And Mrs. Monso, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. My name's Ketura Mazo. I've been teaching university for over 20 years in the field of communication. I've taught speech, professional communication for executives, which is primarily an advanced public speaking course catered to branding yourself for your future careers. And I also
Mhm,
teach scientific and technical communication, so a
mhm,
writing class. Before that, I was an English teacher in the Brevard Public School System for 7 years. I was a team leader and a college intern,
mhm,
teacher, trainer for first year teachers of English here in Brevard County, Florida. I'm still,
mhm.
up until next month, state certified by the state of
Uh-huh.
Florida as a public school teacher, but I
Mhm.
prefer teaching university students, so I've stayed in that area.
Very nice. So, Mrs. Manso, so your specialty is in communication.
Yes.
So, our audience, we have university students in our audience, and we have doctors, engineers, like we have different groups of people in our audience. So, can you please tell us what is communication actually?
Communication is really a combination of your nonverbals as well as your verbals, which are simply the words you speak. So it's learning how to write, speak, and present yourself in a professional
Mhm,
manner to an audience, and that can be anywhere from the personal distance you keep from
mhm,
one another
mhm,
to
mhm,
your conversation skills, to your presentation skills, to your writing skills, which is how most people view communication as simply their writing, but
mhm,
most of our communication is actually nonverbal or face-to-face conversations
mhm.
daily.
Okay. And like now, when we compare the Sri Lankan education, Mrs. Manzo, like in Sri Lanka, in universities, if you are learning one subject, let's say like science, you're only learning science. But in America, what I've seen was like, even at the Florida Institute of Technology, like when you are in the tech field, you are learning about communication and some other subjects as well. So, what's the importance of that one? Why should we learn communication actually?
Communication is the foundation of a social being. So, learning how to professionally work with one another, and especially in STEM fields, it's very important to realize that we're not all going to communicate in the same manner, that we show respect to one another differently culturally.
Mm-hmm,
And since we are becoming much more globalized, as an example of what we're doing here today, it's
mm-hmm,
important that we are respectful of one another when we are having those conversations and
mm-hmm,
building those projects together.
mm-hmm. Okay.
So, so that's part of why we emphasize it. I do try to personally work with the other departments, especially my engineers, on
Mm-hmm,
how to convey their thoughts, because as I've told them, you can have the greatest idea in the
mm-hmm,
world, but if you
mm-hmm,
can't properly communicate that idea to a general
mm-hmm,
audience or to your
mm-hmm,
project managers, who are often more social science business people,
mm-hmm,
then
mm-hmm,
it will fail. That's the number one reason they fail, is that people don't understand what your purpose is behind this project.
So, Mrs. Marshall, like now, when it comes to engineers or especially like pilots, like when I was there, I was like studying to be a pilot. So we came from a background like we are heavily focused on the STEM subjects. Like we didn't really have an experience there. So, what are the challenges that you have faced when you are teaching these students? Because their main focus is like science or technology or mathematics. So, how did you like overcome those challenges?
I think the best way to overcome challenges is to meet audiences where they're at. So
Hmm.
my projects, when we get to that final culmination project at the end, so the first part of my semester is really about the theory and doing some activities and learning the theory. The second half of the semester is all about group projects. I try to make those projects come from the students' interest. So we brainstorm ideas together. If it's something where I have to refine the topic more, then I still give options so that groups can go in and say, okay, out of the 15 items you have here, we're going to focus on this one. And that way, you're invested in it. Hopefully you're not spending all that money to get a college degree to go work somewhere where you have no interest in the field. The challenge for me then, being an English and communication person, sometimes is to understand what it is from a higher level standpoint that they're coming and talking to me about. So I remind them that I'm the social science person, the more business person that they would be presenting to, so that it's really important to include visuals with our writing. It's really important to have a visual with your presentation and not sit there and be reading from PowerPoints. And so that has been the challenge. And then, of course, we have AI, which
Yeah.
has entered the picture. And
Uh-huh.
my joke is that engineers hated writing so much that they spent thousands of dollars and thousands of years developing how to have someone write a paper for
Yeah.
them. That
Yeah.
is ironic. If you ask AI to grade the actual paper that it wrote, it normally won't give it above a C. It's just not there yet. So now our challenge is, how do we use AI effectively in the communication classroom? It's like the TV and the computer. It's not going anywhere. It will get better. So how do we use that tool to our best advantage? So that's our new challenge, that as a class, we've had some fun playing with and seeing what it comes up with. So
Actually, Mrs. Marshall, like when you're talking about AI, like that question was in me. Like I saved the best part for the last. Like I want to talk about AI, but before that one, I want to know, Mrs. Marshall, like when you are teaching communication, are you paying attention to communication studies in India, or Sri Lanka, or Japan, or like do you really pay attention to those like different regions, how they are teaching communication, or you're only focused on US and US economy?
I do try to have a global approach. I am a bit more reliant on my students pointing out good
Hmm.
research for me from other countries. And of course, I am unfortunately only an English speaker. I can read a bit of French or Spanish, but anything
Yeah,
else,
I know you
I
can
have to
speak
have,
Spanish. Yeah,
yeah, a little bit.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't, I'm in Florida, so you have to speak a little. And
yeah,
my husband is Cuban, so he's bilingual, so he can
yeah,
help me along there. But
hmm,
I would say that it is important to look at
yeah,
communication studies globally. And the nice thing about the
hmm,
professional communication for executives is
hmm,
that that normally is compiled with
hmm,
studies from all over the world and companies from all over the world to see what kind of
hmm,
challenges people will be facing
hmm,
globally. And, especially
hmm,
with pilots, that's really, really important, that if they are
hmm,
flying internationally, that they know what it is that they
hmm,
will be walking into. It's also really important with our engineers who have worked on,
hmm,
especially ocean engineers who get out there on ships and enter into different territories, to
hmm,
understand how to present themselves.
hmm,
Especially some of my female engineers, we have talked about
Yeah.
abiding by cultural rules. So
Hmm. Wow.
no matter
That's
how
really
much they
nice.
don't want to. So
Actually, like, I mean, like, when it's come to communication, to be really honest with you, when I was in your class, I didn't really understood like how big of a deal it was to communicate, to be really honest with you. Because like I thought that I just had to get the credit and get out of this class. That was like, to be honest with you, my
right,
basic instinct. Like I didn't like think that was so valuable, but after like dropping out of FIT, obviously then coming back here in Sri Lanka and like again going back to the uni, getting a degree, then like nowadays all I do is like communicate with people, like talk properly, like teaching lessons. Now I believe like that's the most important thing. Like even though to make a rocket, you have to communicate properly, otherwise rocket won't be there, isn't it? Like
right.
um, yeah, so I think now it's a very important subject. And talking about communication, I've seen like you're doing bit of like healing communication. Am I correct? I don't know, ma'am. Like,
Yes. So that
yeah.
is a little more of the Eastern culture coming
Okay. Tell
into
me
my
more about
life.
it. Yeah.
Coming
Uh-huh.
into my life, I do, I was always learning. In the summer, I spend learning. And
Mm-hmm.
so I always am learning some type of outside certification. COVID
Mm-hmm.
has opened up a lot of online things that I
Mm-hmm.
can do in my free
Yeah.
time. And
Mm-hmm.
so, unfortunately, teaching college, teaching middle school and high school, you do have incidents where students pass away, they lose family members. We had a lot who
Yeah.
lost family members.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel that that art of conversation with one another has been taken away because social media, although it can be a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful branding tool,
Mm-hmm.
takes the conversation, that face to face, how your words are affecting others out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yes, now I actually do a few things on the side with the healing conversation. After
Yeah.
losing both of my parents, I
Uh-huh.
moved
Oh.
into that
Yeah.
realm of building timelines and saying, okay, I'm going through grief, but what else
Mm-hmm.
am I learning through this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And connecting energies. People exchange and connect energies all the time. I talk to my
Yeah.
students about this. If you walk into a workplace and
Mm-hmm.
you feel
Mm-hmm.
that this is just not the place for you, then I really
Mm-hmm.
want them to consider, should I work here? Because it's not a matter of
Okay.
can you work in an uncomfortable place? Can you
Mm-hmm.
have uncomfortable conversations? You absolutely can. But from personal experience and from what the research shows us, that will increase your stress level to a point
Yeah.
where it's not fun anymore. It's not,
Yeah.
you are walking on eggshells trying to fit in, where perhaps if you had just, I know I've talked with students about this. They'll come to me and they're so disappointed. Oh, I really thought I wanted to work at this company, or I really thought I wanted to go to this grad school. And then they go there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it with my own two kids on tours, and they're like, this is just, it's not the right place for me.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
And then you wait and it's been a week or two, but that seems like the end of the world when you get your first college degree, and they'll come back to me and they say, "Oh, this
Mm-hmm.
other place came through for me. They got me the work visa. Everyone was
Yeah.
friendly. They have
Mm-hmm.
donuts on Fridays." And that's
Yeah.
all about conversations we have, the
Mm-hmm.
energy we exchange with people. So yes, what I do on the side is I've mainly been working with victims of post-traumatic stress disorder and helping them build timelines throughout their life to see. I mean, no surprise, many people that go into the military,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not like here in the US, it's not an automatic draft. So South Korea is a
Yeah.
little different with my students from there, but the
Yeah.
ones who from the US, they wanted to be soldiers. They grew up,
Mm-hmm.
they idealized being a soldier, but then
Mm-hmm.
we war. And oftentimes, if you are directly out there on the front lines and seeing what's happening, you sort of lose parts of you.
Parts of it. I mean, that's true. Like when I was in FIT, like there were like ROTC. I don't know whether it's like ROTC students, right? So like
Yes,
when I see their uniforms, like I was like, damn, like I want to be like a soldier like them because like they have that like energy to it, like
yes.
but yeah, I get the point. And one more question, Mrs. Manso, like I see you on LinkedIn all the time. Like you're very active. I feel like you're all the time, like always learning something. And here you are. You said that you are learning about healing communication, and you're still like uh, continuously learning. Uh, But some of my students, when I talk to them, they are saying that okay, I'm done with this degree. Like after this degree, I'm not gonna learn. Right? I'm just gonna get the job and like get the money, and I'm not gonna learn again. But you are doing the opposite side. Yeah, I mean, you have the experience. I know you are getting a good salary and like you have the reputation, but you're still learning. My question is why?
Because I want to. I enjoy it. And I do talk to my students about when you're here at university, this is something I'll credit my husband with our kids growing up.
Mhm,
You really want to focus in on the skills you're learning. We can't teach you everything about that corporation, that organization, that job, but we can teach you skills in each and every class so
mhm,
that you may qualify for the job.
mhm,
I like to do two things. One reason I started attending classes online and going back to school to get other things was that I wanted to put myself back in the position of my students to
mhm,
know what it feels like, to walk in and to
mhm,
say, okay, I'm going to be tested. I'm going to have to manage my time again. I'm going to have to sometimes work with personalities that are not the ones I have chosen, but the ones that have been
mhm,
chosen for me.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
found it really helpful. And I also learn from other teachers. I learn a lot from the online forums currently
mhm,
so that I can take my skills to the next level and hopefully
mhm,
start offering trainings online to
mhm,
corporations internationally. I love to travel. And now that I don't have kids at
mhm.
home, they're all grown up, I can do that.
You're
I love
welcome to come
getting
to Sri Lanka one day, Mrs. Maso. Come to Sri Lanka one day.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I want to go pretty much everywhere except perhaps
Yeah.
the Arctic because I'm not good in snow. I have a hard time in Canada.
Ah,
Let's put it that way.
ah,
I'm cold in the summer in
okay.
Canada,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
I'm doing an international coaching
Mhm.
certificate right now, and I'm
Wow.
learning so much about asking questions and being present, which
Mhm,
I do in
mhm,
when I teach conversation in class, we talk about that. But now
mhm,
I'm saying, okay, this is how I could integrate it daily in my
mhm,
class.
mhm,
And just getting people, you actually learn better if you write things out on paper. It goes through a separate processing system in your brain, but it's
mhm.
really hard to get STEM kids away from
Yeah.
their
Mhm, mhm,
computers.
mhm,
So now I'm saying, okay, what I'm learning, I'm taking some of these questions from the coaching. At the end of each class, they're going to have a notebook just to briefly answer that question, record and answer it. Because I
mhm,
want them to get the most they can from class without me stressing their
mhm,
hands from writing too much.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Which I'm
yeah,
old
I hear
school, I
you.
write everything out anyhow, but I understand the convenience
Yeah,
of having a computer.
yeah,
And there are now even AI programs
yeah,
that professors permission, you can record the lecture, it will take the
yeah,
notes and make flashcards, which I think is
yeah.
especially wonderful for people who have that processing disorder.
Mhm, mhm.
But it does make that retention
Yeah,
less. So
less. And talking about AI, Mrs. Ma, so like, I mean, I mean, basically, I'm not a technical person. Like, even though I came to FIT, dropped out, then I pursued my degree in another area. So basically, I'm not a real technical person. So when I look at this AI, like innovation things coming up, and ChatGPT, like Gemini, different companies have different things going on. But when I look at it, like I feel like okay, there's a demand for AI, but at the same time, I feel like the human qualities, especially communication, will have kind of like a huge demand in the future. Uh, so, what's your take on that? We talked about something earlier also, but what do you think will be the trend in the future regarding communication, AI, and all those things?
I think that we're never going to get away from this face-to-face being the best type of communication, simply because all of those nonverbals that we as humans and as creatures rely upon, that I don't think it will be replaced. But AI is a really effective tool as a place starter. So STEM students often have a really hard time saying they're given this paper assignment. Lord forbid if it's something like reflecting on a poem, then that's really out of the realm. Well, how do we get started? So what I do is I model in class. I'm not teaching literature, so I've got a little more of their attention, but I say, okay, here's this final project. It's immense. We're working in a group. I want you to, as a group, feed in a prompt to AI for it to create a Roman numeral outline of how should I write this? How do I get started? And then from there, what we do is I put everybody's AI generated outline one by one as a group up on the screen, and we pick and choose as the instructor, the person who I kind of already know what I want this to look like. I say, okay, I like this group's introduction of, and it basically becomes a skeleton for them to write from. So they fill in the blank. And then they have to say, oh, but we need transitions. And they'll say to me, oh, but these sources are terrible. Yes, they are. So then we go back, okay, you're going to have to provide me with a link to a valid source. So I've used it in that manner. I actually go out in the community occasionally and teach writing workshops for kids. So in the fall, I had a challenge. I was working at a local community center. They were not pro Halloween, which is really hard to do when it's Halloween weekend here. Kids love that. But they were pro fall, which is funny because in Florida we don't really have a fall, but we're gonna go with that. So I said,
It's like the climate is like just like the Sri Lankan climate. Like, yeah, it's just like warm.
Yeah, it's hot and hotter. That's pretty much our climate.
Yeah.
I had to go through, and so what I did was I said, okay, AI, I want you to leave me 6 blanks and generate a list of fall or autumn words in Mad Lib style. So, where it leaves a place blank and says you need to put in an adjective or an adverb. The kids loved it. The most, I guess, fulfilling experience from it is a local writer actually brought her children to that workshop, and she spent the entire time at my table using those Mad Lib prompts to write poetry. And she came up with, I think, 4 pages of poetry that we ended up displaying on the walls at the community center for the kids to come through and see, wow, this is really how you should do this. And it was funny to see her face when I said, okay, just so you know, those Mad Libs, that was AI generated. Now I'm not reading them for you, but I'm giving you a vocabulary. Yeah. So there are ways to use it quite effectively as a tool. I have had students generate websites where they have to say this was an entire website of blogs created with AI. But what was funny is the students tried doing that and they're like, oh, this is a terrible writer. It's not, they're like, why is it putting emojis? That's not very professional. So they ended up having to go back and rewrite what AI had given them a start with.
Well, Mrs. Mato, I want to share my experience as well. Like I had the same similar experience today in the morning. Like I was like checking some grammar, then it had like pointed out the wrong grammar. Then I asked like, why did you give me the wrong grammar? Then it apologized. Like, it's just like still developing. I think we can't really rely upon that one, isn't it?
Right. Right. That
Yeah.
is actually, it's just not there yet. And every
Yes.
time you are feeding something into it, you are adding to its data collection. So I
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
remind my students of that. I'm like, I know some of you
Mm-hmm.
have been feeding your papers, but we really, especially in STEM fields, need to be very careful about
Mm-hmm.
doing that, because if it's something with a non-disclosure agreement, you really,
Mm-hmm.
it should be made clear that should not be fed into
Yeah.
data situation. So I know some of the local engineering firms do have that restriction, but it does not
Mm-hmm.
mean that they don't ever use it. One thing
Mm-hmm.
AI is very good at, that it does read
Mm-hmm.
very quickly, is providing feedback. So
Mm,
say
yeah.
you've developed, your work meeting,
Mm,
there's nothing non-disclosure in there. It's just simply how we're going to go throughout the day. And then the
mm-hmm.
teams have to report back how many steps they completed. It will
Mm-hmm.
very quickly generate standard feedback
Mm-hmm.
much quicker than a human mind does.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. I have seen instructors who use it to generate feedback comments so
Mm-hmm.
that it is more clear to the student than just their scribble on the page.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
it's a tool, but it's not going to write your grant for you. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. Not
Yeah.
effectively.
Of course. Yeah, like still like when I'm teaching also like in the classroom is also like some people are like they treat it as a god and some people have skepticism. Like there are two groups actually, like and I'm not gonna take more time from you. I know the time is very valuable for you. So one last question, Mrs. Marshall. So what is the most important advice that you can give uh, to a student who are trying to learn communication studies? For example, I'm trying to pursue a master's in communication. So, what is that one advice that you want to like give to those like students like me?
Communication will affect you in every facet of your life. So
Mm-hmm.
it is wonderful and necessary to have that global aspect, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
to never forget that your face-to-face communication is your most valuable because you have those nonverbals, which is
Mm-hmm.
really where studying other cultures and other countries come in, because especially
Mm-hmm.
as Americans, we can be a little outrageous sometimes with what we do without even
Yeah.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's a skill that's transferable to any job that you have. It's just necessary. We do rely on each other, even as a college instructor up there in front of
Mm-hmm.
that classroom. How
Mm-hmm.
you embrace your class with your
Mm-hmm.
communication from your nonverbal, so all the way from your energy right to your words coming out of your mouth matters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you feel in any way that shift, that perhaps you've offended someone or you have stepped over a boundary, the
Mm-hmm.
communication is how you will repair that. It's really the only way to do that. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
it can set a boundary that you did not intend to set. So I think, math and English, that's where it's at. Learning those
Yeah.
communication skills, no matter where you're from, are really, really important. So,
True, true. So thank you, Mrs. Mazo. It's a wonderful advice, like for me, and I will pass to my students and for my audience who are watching this on YouTube and LinkedIn and like on other platforms. Like that's kind of like a golden advice, isn't it?
good.
Right.
Yes. Well,
So
and I'm so happy to see you here today. It's been quite a while.
been quite a while, definitely. And thank you for like accepting my invitation and coming to my podcast, Mrs. Mazo. And
Of course. Thank you.
like I had to like ask few. I'd love to talk to you like for hours, but I know like you have a busy schedule, so I don't want to waste your time as well. So thank you very much. We'll definitely we'll do another episode. I have more questions to ask from you, and I have noted down some of the points that you have told me. So, like, thank you, Mrs. Marshall, for coming to our podcast show today. Thank you. I will.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.